I'm here with Lisa Chen, CEO of Tours by Locals. Lisa, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Lisa is a global, let's say, CEO. She's had amazing experience. She's also a Wharton grad. But the question everybody wants to know is, what is the hardest thing about living with someone from Taiwan? We'll get into that in a second.
I don't think it's a Taiwanese thing. I think it's a my husband thing. He has to be on time. Like, he gets really stressed out if we're not on time. I'm Latin, at least half of me. The half of me that's never on time is the Latin half, and so that has always been a sticking point for us.
So tell us about Tours by Locals. What is that?
Yes, so we are a company that helps travelers find local private tour guides. And we have over 5,200 guides. We have tours in over 185 countries. We've served over 3 million travelers. We've been around for 15 years. But we're different. We're not a tour operator. So essentially, we're a place where, as a traveler, you come, you find the local tour experience you want with the guide that you want. You can, whilst they're always private, you can oftentimes customize the tours, which is one of the really great benefits of taking the time to invest in choosing a private tour, is that you can then end up saving a lot of time in terms of seeing the best places possible with that tour guide and customizing it to meet your needs. The one thing about us is that our tour guides are not part of travel operators. They are their own solopreneurs. So what this means is that they set their own pricing and they get a majority of the payment. We take a small commission and they get the money that empowers them to continue doing what they do, as well as to help travelers discover places off the beaten path, have local experiences, and to be able to give back to the local communities, not the big conglomerates in the tourist areas, that then empowers those local communities to succeed.
A lot of people want to do tours, they want to do travel, but you specifically focus on buy locals.
Yes.
Where did that idea come about?
Yeah, what's the origin story for this Avengers character? So there was the two co-founders of the business were traveling in China in 2007. And they were on their last day. They had already exchanged all their currency. They had a few hours left for their flight, and they had some free time. And so they decided to go to the Great Wall of China. While there, they met a local woman who offered to give them a tour. She spoke English. They took the tour. It was amazing. They loved it until at the end, she asked for money. They didn't have money. They had already exchanged all their currency. And it was a very uncomfortable situation for them. So literally on the flight home, they created the concept of, gee, wouldn't it be great as a traveler if you could hire a local tour guide to take you where you wanted to go, where you didn't have to negotiate at the very end, you pay up front, and the tour guide sets their own price. So they're in control of their own career and of their own fate, if you will. And that became Tours by Local.
Let's talk about Lisa Chen. How did you get started in the world? Who started you?
Who started me? So I was started in Southern California by a Cuban immigrant, a political refugee from Cuba. So my mother is Cuban, my father is American, and so I literally came into this world with a cultural awareness that there's no one right word. There's just different words to say things. There's no one right way to do things. There's just different ways to do things. I also came into a world where people have biases. And I saw those biases exposed very early on. And I think that very much shaped who I am, the experiences that I chose to have as an adult, and what carries me in my career and in my personal philosophy today.
You talk about something called CI. What is CI?
So as I was reflecting on our conversation earlier, I thought of the idea that I spent my first 20 years sort of building cultural awareness. And it started first with my mother being Cuban, but it also was as a result of us having different students through international exchange programs. And so this cultural awareness very much led into the types of experiences I started to have as an early adult. I like the idea of building cultural intelligence. You know, we have emotional intelligence, but I think cultural intelligence is as important, if not even more important, than emotional intelligence, especially in this day and age that we're in. So cultural intelligence.
Where was the first seed of travel for you? How did that happen?
Yeah, so I think for me, the first seed was my father was working in Japan, and the company paid for us to stay with him in Tokyo for the summer. And so we stayed in Tokyo, lived in an apartment, and we traveled throughout the country for the summer. And that experience of having to navigate a country where I do not speak the language, and this was back in early 1990s. And so even today, there's much more English to help you manage getting around the city of Tokyo. That didn't exist back then. So I very much had to learn skills and be resourceful in terms of how to navigate the city and getting around. I mean, even as something as finding a bank or what have you, ordering the right things, and then learning how to be respectful in the context of the culture in which you're in. To put it another way, not to be the ugly American whilst we were there.
You finish Wharton, you go and get a job where, and at what point does your career intersect with your own passion or conflict with your own passions for travel?
Yeah, so if we think about the phases, that's sort of my journey. I think the first 20 years were about building that cultural intelligence. The next 20 years were really around expanding my perspective. And so that, it actually did start with my travels to Japan. I moved to New York City before business school. After business school, I had an opportunity to live in South Africa for a year. And that to me was a pivotal moment in my life and in my career. It was a fantastic experience. It is a beautiful country. And I was able to work there. So it was the first time I actually worked internationally. So when I came back from that experience, and I frankly would have stayed longer, but it was right after 2001, and we were in a recession, what have you. So came back and then started working at Disney. So that gave me opportunity to continue to expand my horizon, so to speak. And that culminated in my husband. I met my husband in LA, and we ended up quitting our jobs to travel for a year. And that was the next pivotal moment. So coming out of, and we lived like locals when we traveled. So to be clear, we stayed in places for a month, 2 months, lived in Taiwan for 2, in Taipei for 2 months, Beijing for a month, Buenos Aires for a couple of months. We stayed as locals. We would often take private tours or small group tours so we could get the lay of the land, so we could be sensitive to understanding how we needed to behave and sort of what the cultural norms were in each of the places that we visited. Coming out of that, we had an opportunity to move to Austin, and I had an opportunity to start working at HomeAway. And that's the next phase, which is about learning about business and market. So business in terms of, in travel, the global dynamics. What are the global use cases that support different travel technologies, different like bed and breakfast stays, hotel stays, HomeAway Vrbo stays. And then also getting hyper specific and hyper local. What does it look like for Germans to pay for things? They don't use credit cards. You have to have other payment options to provide for a German audience that you don't have to, that are not part of other audiences. So getting really specific around the cultural nuances, messaging, products, things like that. And then that has led me to my current state, which is I'm sort of taking all of those phases and putting them together and leading tours by locals through and scaling tours by locals so that we can get even more travelers having amazing, authentic local experiences with locals.
And Lisa, a lot of people, when they manage teams internationally,
yes,
there's lots of challenges.
There is, yeah.
Most people have experience managing teams of people who report to them or vice versa, and that's in one issue. But you have people who actually don't even report to you, and you still have to work with them.
So
challenges.
Yes, and that is sort of leading into the fourth phase, which is around how I bring in my leadership style. It's around perspective and quite honestly, adaptability. So for example, at Expedia, I ended up leading teams of people, hundreds of people across 15 countries. I ended up working with people even across more countries, and at Tours by Local, we're remote. So we have a small team because our tour guides are not our employees, they're solopreneurs, but we have a small team, but yet we are distributed across the world, Malaysia, Argentina, Europe, Canada, the US. And so for me, I very much bring a leadership style that is based on adaptability. So recognizing that there isn't a right way to do things, there are many different ways to do things, and some of those can have the same outcome, and one of them could have an even better outcome. I check my biases at the door. Culture Map. Have you heard of this book, Culture Map? This has become my tome, my Bible. The Culture Map talks about, it's a woman at Harvard Business School, it talks about 8 mechanisms of communication. And that has been a huge unlock. Certain countries, certain cultures communicate differently. People from the Netherlands are very direct. I personally identify with that communication style. Same thing with people from Scotland. People from other cultures, it's less about the words they say and more about the context. In Japanese, the idea of reading the air. Reading the air, think about that. Think about the cognitive space you have to be in. That is a phrase because context is really powerful in Japan. Culture Map helped me understand my mom, who is Cuban, helped me understand my mother-in-law, who is Taiwanese. And I had so many aha moments around how I needed to adapt my communication style to better connect with them and then bring that to the entire organization, both when I was Expedia and now at Tours by Local. The other piece really quickly is around experimentation. Like, experimentation is so important. When you check your biases at the door and you recognize that there isn't one right way, it makes you realize how important having a growth mindset, which is an overused word, but experimentation and just iterating on improvements is really important in terms of driving forward progress. And then lastly, diversity of thought is critical. I can't imagine doing what we do without having that diversity of thought.
What's an example of a staff member or a partner that said something that your first reaction was, this is just not going to work, and you actually transformed your perspective after a while?
Yeah, so I have 2 examples. I'll give one that's slightly different, but I think more poignant. So last year we had our compensation cycle, our review cycle. One of the questions, which was written by an English first company, that's the first clue right there, was rate yourself, it was a self-assessment, rate yourself on how valued you feel at the company. Like, so do you feel valued on a scale of 1 to 5? And this was a direct report. And she rated herself really low. Or she rated, not herself, she rated, so I thought me, really low on the scale. And I was appalled. I thought, oh my God, how have I failed her? What have I done wrong? And I had this very visceral reaction. And I thought, okay, wait, because she is not English speaking first. She is an Argentine, so Spanish speaking first. So had the discussion with her, and she didn't mention anything. And I kept waiting for her to mention. I didn't want to mention it first. I wanted her to feel empowered to bring it up, and she didn't. So I finally said, well, let's talk about this question. I understand that you don't feel valued at Tours by Locals. Part of me wanted to be like, what did I do wrong? But I let it sit, and so she said, no, I really don't feel valued because we were going through a change in our tech stack, and she's like, I'm not doing the things that I should be doing. I'm not working on the strategy. I'm not thinking about 2 years. And my mind was like, oh my God, she totally thought about value, the word value, differently than I thought about value. She was looking at the value she was bringing to the company, not the value that I was placing on her. And so that was such an amazing aha moment that we're changing our questions, obviously, for this year. First of all, it was relief, but secondly, it made me realize that the one, like even embedded in our review process, are these words that are loaded that mean different things to different peoples or interpreted differently.
And I would say that there's also that predisposition that if I'm an employee, my employer is asking me if I'm bringing value. They want to know if I'm bringing value. It's a weird thing for them to think, oh no, you're asking if you're showing me that I'm valuable.
Exactly.
Like, who the heck asked that question? Okay, yeah.
Yep, so there's that. The other one is a great one, and that's where Culture Map comes in. There was a product partner when I was at Expedia. She was from the Netherlands. She was known as being difficult to work with, had a really, according to Americans, aggressive communication style. And I had a visceral reactions to her communication style. Then I read the Culture Map, and I read specifically about people who are Dutch. And I approached her and I said, you know what? I'm going to be blunt with her. I'm going to be direct with her. Flash forward a couple of months, we learned how to work really well together. We still communicate. And she even said to me at one point, she's like, you know, Lisa, she's like, I finally feel like I have a good partner to work with. So I think the culture map was very much a part of helping shepherd my shift in sort of thinking about cultural communication styles to be more adaptive.
Lisa Chen, CEO of Tours by Locals. Check it out. Also check out what is this book then?
Oh, culture map, and we'll have to get the author's name.
We'll put it in the link somewhere, okay? Thanks again for the vanbassador. We're excited to see you out there on the road. Again, the intersect of commerce and culture, and how a global mindset not only enriches your life, but it enriches your career as well. See you soon.
Thanks.
This is great. Thank you.
You're welcome. That was fun.
Hugging, also Taiwanese, not like more
no,
so
they don't
than
hug.
They don't hug.
Cubans, we hug and kiss. Like,
yeah.
You go down the line when you're trying to say goodbye as a Cuban and you kiss everyone, and then you have to do it all again because it's taken so long that people are like, oh, you haven't left yet. Okay, goodbye.
Yeah.
You do the whole thing.
For the Taiwanese, not so much.
No, my mother-in-law loves it. She's like, you know, we don't hug, but I like hugging you.
Everyone likes it.
With Chinese and Cuban, I find that, and I may be not quite stating the way the culture map talks about it, but what I remember reading it, it's been a couple years since I read the book, they have more similar communication styles in terms of adding context and being less direct. So for example, my mother-in-law will say, so, you know, in the kitchen, you don't need to prepare the food. I'll prepare the food in our kitchen. I'm like, okay. She'll be like, yeah. So if you need to do something, if you need me to cut fruit, I'll cut fruit. I'm like, okay. And she said, and you know, I noticed that you cut this pomegranate, and it sort of bled on the counter, and it stained the counter, and I was like, aha. Clean up the counter.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
And my mom tends to do the same thing. Like, she kind of beats around the bush.
It's funny because the other side of the spectrum, I've worked a lot with people in Holland and elsewhere, and
I naturally gravitate to that.
yeah,
stuff.
and I like to think of myself as direct, but actually I'm like, could you be a little nicer?
I know. You know who's interested? I think that I'm learning that the Scots are very direct.
Yeah.
And it comes across through my lens as almost being mean. But anytime I've approached somebody from Scotland with this statement, they say, we do it with love. Do it
with love.
It's with love. And so I'm like, okay, I'll give you grace, but you're still mean.